Then Jesus went with them to a place called Gethsemane, and he said to his disciples, "Sit here while I go over there and pray." And he took with him Peter and the two sons of Zebedee, and he began to be grieved and agitated. And then he said to them, "I am deeply grieved, even to death. Remain here and stay awake with me." And going a little farther, he threw himself on the ground and prayed, "My Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me, yet not what I want, but what you want." And then he came to the disciples and found them sleeping, and he said to Peter, "So could you not stay awake with me 1 hour? Stay awake and pray that you may not come into the time of trial. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak." Again, he went away for the second time and prayed, "My Father, if this can but not pass unless I drink it, your will be done." And again, he came and found them sleeping, for their eyes were heavy. So leaving them again, he went away and prayed for the third time, saying the same words. Then he came to the disciples and said to them, "Are you still sleeping and taking your rest? See, the hour is at hand, and the Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Get up, let us be going. See, my betrayer is at hand." The Gospels give us an opportunity each year to take a look at the Passion accounts through the eyes and personal experience of each one of the Gospel writers. Each of the authors have their own opinions about the roles played by the characters in the stories they tell, and they draw their own conclusions about the motives of those characters. For Matthew, Judas' motive for betraying Jesus is simple human greed. Whatever his motive, his action is part of the divine plan and no surprise to God. Judas' decision to betray Jesus follows immediately on the heels of the story of the woman with the alabaster flask filled with very expensive perfume, the full quantity of which she used to anoint Jesus at Bethany in the house of Simon the leper. Her lavishly generous outpouring contrasts Judas' purely selfish act. It seems strange that Judas's snit over the woman's use of expensive oil that could have been and should have been sold and the money given to the poor would be followed up with his visit to the chief priests to ask, "What will you give me if I hand him over to you?" Was he looking for money? Or was it something else? Perhaps the offer of a high position in the council. This plotting to betray Jesus lurks in the shadows of the Passover, and the only individuals aware of the betrayal are Judas, the chief priests, God, and you and I, the readers. The time is at hand to prepare for the feast of the Paschal Lamb. You and I know what is happening, but the disciples are unaware. All of the disciples, not just a delegation of a few of them, but all the disciples, including Judas, are sent by Jesus to make the preparations for the Passover feast. Jesus and the disciples are staying in Bethany on the outskirts of the city of Jerusalem. Therefore, the disciples must go into the city to prepare for the Passover, because Jerusalem is the only place where one can legitimately celebrate the Passover meal. They're going to have to hustle if they are to do and prepare everything in time. Matthew does not outline what those duties are, because he assumes that his readers know that the disciples must locate an appropriate place within the city walls, which will accommodate all of them, and they must search that accommodation in all of the corners, on the floor, in every nook and cranny, to be certain that no leaven is present anywhere about. There can be no leaven in the dining space, not even crumbs of bread left over from a previous meal. They must obtain a lamb, but only one that has been ritually slaughtered by the priests in the temple. The lamb must be roasted and all the other necessary food items purchased and prepared. Oh, this is no small task, and it requires all of the disciples to pull it together. When the meal is set, Jesus doesn't make a grand entrance. He simply takes his seat at the table. In Matthew's story, the first words out of Jesus' mouth are, "Truly, I tell you, one of you will betray me." All of the disciples are nonplussed by his words. Talk about putting a damper on the festivities. In Mark's story, all of the disciples respond all at once in a chaotic clamor of denials. No, 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 no. But in Matthew's gospel, each disciple responds in turn. Surely, not I, Lord. It wasn't me, Lord. I would never do that, Lord. Lord, neither would I do such a thing. My Lord, not I. Lord, never in my life. Lord, no, no, not ever. I could not betray you, my Lord. Surely not I, my Lord. Never, my Lord. No, not today or ever, my Lord. As each one in turn protests his innocence, Jesus continues, revealing that indeed the betrayer is one among them, one who dips his hand into the same bowl with Jesus and the rest. And then Judas, who the scripture says was in the process of betraying Jesus, said, "Surely not I, Rabbi." And there it was. There it was, the proof in a single word. Judas has not addressed Jesus as Lord, as was the custom of all those in the inner circle. Judas addresses Jesus as Rabbi, not Lord. Rabbi. That was the term used by outsiders, who would call him rabbi or teacher. The priests and the Pharisees called him teacher or rabbi, those who were outside the circle of disciples. Judas, now the outsider, has called Jesus Rabbi. And Jesus' response clinches it. You have said so. His word affirms Judas' betrayal. No denying the truth. Judas must own it now. But in Matthew's story, there is no sudden departure of Judas, the betrayer, from the scene. It would seem that in Matthew's account, he remains with Jesus and the others through the whole meal. Judas, the betrayer, is not exiled. He is not ostracized. He's not barred from the table by the one who is betrayed. Instead, it seems he is included, as Jesus took the loaf of bread and after blessing it, broke it and gave it to his disciples and said, "Take, eat, this is my body." Then he took the cup and after giving thanks, he gave it to them, saying, "Drink from it, all of you. For this is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins." Matthew does not include the words, "Do this in remembrance of me." He does not refer to the cup as the new covenant poured out for many, but makes clear that this cup contains within it forgiveness. Judas partakes forgiveness. On this night, Matthew's Jesus has re-signified the meal, transforming it from an occasion for remembering the freedom God gave the people of Israel as they escaped from their oppression in Egypt. He has transformed it into something new altogether. A remembrance of the past will now be an invitation to receive in this moment, in the days to come, in the years to come, in the centuries to come, in the millennia to come, to receive redemption right here and right now. Jesus has created a new table where we are to feast on reconciliation not only with God, but with one another, if we will only partake of it. When we come to the table, we are reconciled to God and each other. It is so very important for us to remember this, to note this. Passover with his disciples and how that influences our approach to the table. We all gathered around this table to partake of the bread and the wine. Although we did not recline and relax here at our table, we shared and passed the bread and passed the cup to one another. Those who sat at this table in the company of Jesus had followed him from Capernaum to this place, and among them was his betrayer. When the meal was finished, all who promised that they would never fall away, that they would never desert him, that they would never deny him or disappoint him, found themselves heavy with sleep in the Garden of Gethsemane, where Jesus is agonizing over what is to come. Jesus confesses to being deeply grieved and agitated, grieved unto death, he says. He asks Peter, James, and John to remain close and to stay awake with him. Who knows how long he was prostrate in prayer. We only know that when he returned in his agitation and grief to be consoled and comforted in the company of his disciples, he found them sleeping. His agitation could only be compounded, and his closest disciples have been falling down on the job. He comes to them he commands them to stay awake and to pray that they will not suffer what he is suffering in this moment, that they will not come to this same time of trial. 3 times, those closest to him failed to stay awake, failed to keep watch, failed to be there for him in his time of trial. Matthew slowly but surely reveals to us that the betrayal of Judas is not the only betrayal that will occur this night. In Matthew's gospel, all fall down. While the disciples were sleeping, Judas must have slipped away to fetch a contingent of sword-wielding, club-wielding thugs from the chief priests and the elders of the people. Because they were not acquainted with Jesus, Judas had to identify the one to be arrested. Again, Judas uses the outsider term, rabbi, to address Jesus, and then kisses him as the rest of the disciples look on and the crowd descends upon Jesus. In the next moment, a sword seems to appear in the hands of the disciple as if out of nowhere. One wonders where one of Jesus' followers got his hands on the sword. Anyway, he strikes out against the mob and cuts off someone's ear. It is the arrested and bound Jesus who takes control of the situation. He is no longer agitated. He's no longer grieving unto death. Perhaps because the wheels are at last in motion. There is no more waiting, and he is ready. His disciples, on the other hand, are not assured by anything he says at the time of his arrest. They are not assured by the notion that all has taken place in order that the scriptures would be fulfilled, or they're not assured that it might well be possible for Jesus to turn the whole situation around by appealing to his Abba Father in heaven. No, they are terrified. Do you ever remember running away from someone or something in terror as a child? The disciples flee for their lives, running, panicked, terrified, searching for the safety of anywhere but here. When finally they stop, breathless and shaken, there are only 10 who have found their way to safety. Judas is gone. Jesus is gone. Peter has disappeared. What to do? They've invested 3 years and every waking moment in this endeavor with Jesus. So what will become of them? What do they have to hold on to in this moment of trial that has most assuredly now come to them? Will they remember the gift they received this night? Will they one day find a way to covenant with one another and remember the body bread and the forgiveness cup? Will they discover a way to give the gift, to share the gift with others? My friends, it is on this night that Jesus gave us the tangible symbols of our redemption in him. We all fall down. We all fall away. We all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. Jesus knew this and never ceased to offer us forgiveness. Never should the bread and the cup be denied to anyone. And never should the bread and the cup be begrudged or disclaimed by anyone. Jesus proved to us tonight that the bread and the cup are for friend and foe, even when they are seated at the same table.